Shabbat Shalom. I'm really glad to be with you and want to share some thoughts about this week's Torah portion and our current experience. This week around the Jewish world, we have begun reading from the fourth book of the Torah, the book of Bamidbar. Tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, Juliet Korkoski will be called to the Torah and will share with our congregation a public reading from these first verses, these first words of this significant book of the Torah. Bamidbar means in the wilderness and describes our wanderings, but also speaks, I suggest, to our current experience. We've been here now in quarantine, well, since, as we count things at Road of Shalom, since March 13th, which was the night that we were going to be celebrating Walter Jacobs' 90th birthday. We streamed that service and the next from an empty sanctuary and then moved into our respective non-disclosed locations. And we've been Zooming ever since, like the ancient Israelites who migrated through the desert towards a place called Mount Sinai, which has become synonymous with learning, with revelation, and with the expression of the human life force that gives in each generation us the impetus and the reason to create anew. We've moved on to Zoom. That's where we've migrated. And we find ourselves here now, many weeks into the experience. We might feel disoriented. Our own experience surely in our homes and our places of work, our schools have been suspended, summer camps have been called off. We may feel ourselves lost, without a sense of landmark and boundary and a sense of orientation. And this sense of loss is described in an article I happened to come across this week that was in Wired magazine. It's called Why We Totally Freak Out When We Get Lost. I want to read you a little bit because it's really very interesting. To be lost is a dreadful thing. Fear of being lost appears to be hardwired in the human brain. Millions of years of evolution have taught us that the experience tends not to end well. Fear runs deep in the culture. Children lost in the woods is as common motif in modern fairy tales as it is in ancient mythology. And folklore, fairy tales, and horror films have taken their toll on our sensibilities, and so it is that today we genuinely are terrified of getting lost. Now listen to this. It is hard to predict how someone who is lost will behave, though it's safe to assume that we won't do ourselves much good. We don't seem to help ourselves. It seems that we are overcome by an impulse, an extraordinarily powerful impulse has written one. Another is described as a kind of madness, wherein we are compelled, it seems, to begin moving. Invariably, we are overcome by a need to begin moving, to make decisions, to do something. And invariably, all the research shows, people go round and round in circles to their own detriment. And here, listen to this. In places without landmarks, disorientation causes people to walk in circles or to loop back on themselves. Errors quickly accumulate. Small deviations become larger ones, and we end up walking in circles regardless of how long we walk for. In the absence of landmarks and boundaries, it seems that our brains cannot compute direction and distance, and we are left flailing in space. I want to suggest to you that all is not lost, and we are not lost. Because though we have been knocked down, perhaps are a bit concussed, reeling from the reality of what it means to be living amidst a pandemic, what it means to make congregation in the 21st century given these new truths. The truth is that we have had a plan for a while. We've been speaking of courageous conversations, about collaboration, about rewriting the architecture of our community, and of Road of Shalom playing a very different role with regard to its neighbors and to our entire community. Now that geography and time have all but collapsed as we move virtual, move from the real world, as it were, to the real world that is now virtual, we may feel that we don't have landmarks, but let me suggest to you four that have been an orientation for me, and I've been sharing widely with our staff, with our executive committee, our lay leaders. I shared last evening at our board meeting this same message. Our core mission remains the same as it's ever been. That is the essence of who we are, although we will do it in new ways. Our core mission is not ours exclusively, and we have much more in common with our neighbors than we realize. I've been saying this next one for many years. No one congregation or organization or agency or entity, for that matter, no one state or country, no one congregation can solve its challenges solo. We need one another. And number four, our audience, our market, our congregation, our community, however we want to reference our group, who we want to reach, what we want to accomplish. Our audience, our market is much larger than we imagine. We need to focus in on our core mission, what it is that we were created to do as a congregation, who we are at our essence and what's most important, even if we find new ways to do it. And we must do that in collaboration, lead in collaboration with our neighbors, with the other congregations, with the agencies, with the federation, with all who wish to partner with us in getting the job done. If you don't care who gets the credit, you can accomplish an enormous amount. And if we stay focused on what our core mission is, we can do the greatest good. That's how we will find our way through this wilderness. All is not lost. We are not lost. We are just reorienting ourselves and returning to the way we've been going, forward into the 21st century, step by step. That journey we began 16 years ago, and I look forward to partnering as we continue to move into the future together. Shabbat Shalom. May we strengthen one another.